When you think of anarchism, do you think of chaos and violence, or do you think of politics? Welcome back to my series, The Politics Playbook, where I'm talking you through the basics of politics and creating a safe space for you to learn more. And today's episode, we are talking about anarchism. Anarchism is probably one of the most misunderstood political philosophies because most people generally think of chaos and violence and a society without order, but what actually is anarchism as the political philosophy? At its core, anarchism is the belief that society should be organised itself without rule and without any need for any sort of hierarchy. The word comes from the Greek word anarchia, which roughly translates to without a ruler. And anarchists argue that they believe people should organise society voluntarily without any kind of involvement from any sort of government organisation that may have some sort of coercive control. Modern anarchism developed largely in the 19th century alongside socialism and industrial capitalism, and one of the earliest people to call themselves an anarchist was a guy called Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who famously declared property is theft in 1840. Some later thinkers such as Mikhail Bakunin and Peter Kropotkin, they developed different forms of anarchism. However, they both shared the one core belief that any kind of coercive political or economic power should be completely abolished. You may think that the way I've described anarchism sounds a lot like communism, and that is where anarcho-communism comes from. Anarcho-communists favour a society based around common ownership, mutual aid, charity, and voluntarily working together. Whilst anarcho-syndicalists see trade unions and worker-controlled organisations as a way to sort of replace capitalism and the state. But most classic anarchist movements are favoured towards the political left, as they want to abolish the state in terms of the political and economic power. They want to remove any kind of hierarchies that come from capitalism or private ownership. However, anarchism doesn't necessarily mean a society with absolutely no rules and no organisation whatsoever. A lot of anarchists actually advocate for really highly organised communities, just want that organisation to happen from the bottom up rather than the top down. Decisions could then be made through local assemblies, worker cooperations, federations, and direct democracy. Now, there have actually been attempts to try and put some of these anarchist ideas into practice, specifically during the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. During this civil war, anarchist organisations attempted to collectivise factories and public services. However, it did unfortunately end up in quite a violent civil war. And that's kind of the reason why anarchism became associated with violence and disorder. During the late 19th and early 20th century, a lot of anarchist organisations carried out things like assassinations and bombings, and that became known as the propaganda of the deed. Because of this, governments and newspapers declared anarchists as this group of violent, overthrowing people. So anarchism isn't the belief that society should just descend into chaos. It is a broad political philosophy that asks a very radical question. If society is able to voluntarily organise itself, what is the need for hierarchies or power?